Are you sensitive? Because same. And if you have sensitive skin, there are certain ingredients that are more likely to cause irritation and redness and problems than if you weren't so sensitive. But you know what? Being sensitive is sometimes a good thing, and it's not about trying to change our skin or be someone who we're not naturally. It's about embracing who we are and what our skin is and working with it instead of against it. So let's talk about sensitivity and specifically some of the ingredients that can trigger irritation in sensitive skin. And this actually comes from one of our beautiful butterflies named Noah. This was a video request on our Discord Patreon, and I thought, what a fantastic topic that so many people deal with and probably don't even know what might be in those ingredient lists that could be doing more harm than help. And we need to start by defining sensitivity. What is sensitive skin? For example, my skin, if you just touch it, it gets very red, but I can actually handle a lot of pain. For some people, sensitivity means sensitive to certain ingredients or allergens. If you have an allergy, you probably have sensitive skin. And for other people, it does mean redness or flushing that can come along with rosacea. For some people, it just means that things burn. And as you can see, because the word sensitive has so many different things that can be attributed to it, there are going to be some things that are bad for some people, but not for others. But let's go through a skincare routine step by step and talk about some of those common culprits, starting with cleansers. Many cleansers tend to have a fragrance, which yes, we need to discuss. Not all fragrance is bad, but the hard thing about fragrance is that we don't exactly know what's in it. When fragrance is listed on a skincare bottle or an ingredient list, it can have a blend of tens, if not hundreds, or even thousands of things, because that fragrance is a custom mix that a cosmetic chemist or a fragrance chemist has put into a product. You can also have an unscented product, but a lot of people don't know that unscented is actually a scent. And if you do have sensitive skin, there might be one of those 30 things that ends up in a fragrance that causes you to have an irritation or to get red or break out in some sort of a hive. And that's why people who do have sensitive skin should probably stay away from fragrance. Now, when it comes to a true fragrance allergy, you need to get that diagnosed by a derm. Most fragrance allergies, or like real fragrance allergies, happen in about 2 to 5% of the population. At least that's what data is showing, but it could be higher, and fragrance allergies can develop over time. So if you're sensitive, it's best to just play it safe and avoid the fragrances altogether. And this also includes essential oils. Now, what is an essential oil versus a fragrance? Well, an essential oil could have an astringent property, it could have omega fatty acids in it. It depends on what essence or essential oil it actually is. Sometimes essential oils do have benefits, and sometimes essential oils actually act as fragrancing ingredients inside of products. So that's something to be aware of. Now, in general, the essential oils that are most likely to cause irritation to some people are things like cinnamon, things like eucalyptus, or even lavender, etc. But even things like tea tree or rose can also cause irritation, and that's going to vary from person to person. The best thing you can do is find cleansers that don't have fragrance. A few of my inexpensive top picks are, of course, from the INKEY list and The Ordinary. This one is better for more dry to combo skin. This is the Squalane cleanser that I personally don't love on my oily prone skin. I've recently fallen in love with this one. This is the Hyaluronic acid cleanser from the INKEY list, and if you have acne, they actually have a really good salicylic acid one. All of these cleansers are inexpensive, affordable, and fragrance-free, but there are some more luxury ones that can also fit the bill. Paula's Choice has a few good ones, and really the gist of it is make sure that you're looking at those ingredients lists, and if you see anything that says essential oil or fragrance, that's what you want to look out for. And do remember there are things like limonene or like hexylcinnamol that are technically fragrancing ingredients, or geraniol, but they don't say that, hey, this is a fragrance. Those are some things you might also want to look out for. And I know it's complicated, but that's why we created this little handy dandy list of all of the things that could be fragrancing ingredients and cause irritation, and you can screenshot and save this for the next time that you make it to the skincare aisle. Another common culprit is found in toners and essences, but it can actually be in other products too, and that is alcohol. But there is a caveat, because not all skincare alcohols are bad. When you see denatured alcohol, SD alcohol, or isopropyl alcohol, that's often what's used to clean things. It's what's used before you get your blood drawn to clean the area. And while it can be good in some cases for skincare to cleanse an area, if you use it on sensitive skin, it can burn, it can sting, and it can flush. Now, keep in mind that in chemistry, anything that is considered an alcohol has an OH group at the end. And because of that, that OH group could actually have a fatty alcohol, a hydrating alcohol, etc. So not all alcohols are bad, but if you do see denatured alcohol, SD alcohol, or something like that, and especially if it's in the first 3 ingredient lists on a product, then you know that that product is something that is going to evaporate off the skin. And if you're using a makeup setting spray and that's what you want, then go for it. Just be careful. And if you're sensitive and if you're prone to dryness, then that's something you probably want to avoid. This has membranaceous root extract. This is one of my favorite essences. This is actually very very hydrating and soothing to the skin, and this has none of those stripping or drying alcohols. If you're looking for a toner or an essence, either can work. Essences tend to be a little bit more hydrating. Toners sometimes infuse more active ingredients into the skin, such as an exfoliant. But overall, there are some great options for both if you do have sensitive skin. And again, this is one of my favorites that, yes, is both alcohol-free and fragrance-free. Something else that we love in skincare, but that can actually irritate sensitive skin, are specific acids. Yes, our favorite salicylic, glycolic, and lactic acids, as wonderful as they are for exfoliation and brightening the skin and even for acne, they can cause irritation in sensitive skin. We've actually done an entire video on why specific acne products or anti-wrinkle products can actually cause skin irritation and damage your skin barrier, and that is the same reason that some of our favorite ingredients are not always best for sensitive skin. You always want to patch test your skincare. You know that that's basically a must, but especially if you have sensitive skin and especially if you're prone to irritation, you need to patch test everything. And that's why acids are so important to be aware of. And not every acid is the same. Glycolic acid has a much smaller molecule than something like salicylic acid. One is water soluble, the other is oil soluble, and they can act differently on different people's faces. Especially if you have an allergy to blackberries or salicylic acid, you're not gonna do so well with the salicylic acid. And that's why, even though these are amazing and can be used on sensitive skin, you really want to be careful. Now, that being said, not everything that ends in acid is going to be irritating or exfoliating. One example is hyaluronic acid. Although in chemistry we call it an acid, it's not exfoliating and it doesn't really damage the skin barrier the way that something like a glycolic acid can. Now, hyaluronic acid can cause irritation in some super sensitive people. Depends on what environment you're in and if you're using hyaluronic acid with other hydrators or not. But we've actually done a video on that as well. And if you're worried about hyaluronic acid and it causing irritation, you can watch that video here. We normally see these acids in the serum step, but remember that these acids can also show up inside of toners or inside of cleansers. And even with all of these ingredients, it doesn't mean that you have to avoid them like the plague. It just means patch test and be aware of them. So if you have an irritation, you can say, oh, it was all of the glycolic acid products that really irritated me. And you can go for a polyhydroxy acid, which is much more gentle on the skin, and you can opt for something like that instead. Something else you want to watch out for are exfoliants. Remember, you can have chemical exfoliants or physical exfoliants, and those chemical exfoliants are what? They're acids. But what about the physical ones? A lot of physical exfoliants have walnut shells, peach shells, apricot pits, and they're very scrubby and irritating to the skin. If you have sensitive skin, avoid abrasion. Just the way you wouldn't attack yourself with sandpaper, you don't want to attack yourself with one of these. And what if you are one of those people who is like, I know I'm sensitive, I know I shouldn't be using a physical scrub to destroy my skin, but I love that feeling of a physical grit or texture. Well, although I hate these products, that is where these things come in. These are these peeling gels. They are basically these products that look like they are balling up on the skin and removing your dead skin cells when really it's just the product balling up on itself. And I hate these because of the way that they're marketed, but when you actually look at them as an exfoliant, they are one of the most gentle things that you can get. As I kind of rub this in here, I will show and demonstrate for you. This basically just balls up on its own, but as it does, it almost gets this jelly or pilly texture to it. And what's great about that is that it's very gentle and it's very soft. There's no rough, jagged edges when it comes to something like this. This one happens to be from the HaruHaru Wonder line. This has a bunch of antioxidants and black rice. I love a lot of the products from this line, although these peeling gels are not my favorite ones. But as you can see, this starts to kind of peel and ball up, and it ends up being a very gentle way to exfoliate. And if you are someone who needs that physical exfoliation and you understand that this is not your dead skin peeling off, it is literally just the product balling up on itself, it is still a very gentle and very simple way to get a good exfoliation in. And for those who are super sensitive, that's when I would actually recommend something like this. Remember, when it comes to gentle chemical exfoliants, you could also use something like polyhydroxy acids. Again, those molecules are really large, so they don't penetrate the skin or cause as much irritation. And you can also look for things such as rice powder. Those are really gentle. One from Dermalogica is the Daily Microfoliant. They have a gentle one that's really good. And as long as you're doing it once every 3 or 4 days and you're not doing it every day and you're not attacking your skin, even if you're sensitive, you should be able to use these safely. This pains me to say, but yes, there are some sunscreens that are not good for sensitive skin, and specifically we are talking chemical sunscreens. Remember that there are chemical/organic sunscreens as well as physical/mineral sunscreens, and unfortunately these ones tend to flash back white or pasty, and these ones normally blend in really elegantly to the skin. But unfortunately, if you're sensitive, these sunscreens can cause irritation. Those are things that end in ONE, like avobenzone, oxybenzone, etc. Homosalate and octocrylene are other ones that can can cause some irritation in some people. And although these certain sunscreen ingredients aren't going to cause irritation for everyone, it is important to figure out which sunscreens work really well on you versus which ones sting when you put them on. And then do they sting if you have an open acne blemish or an open lesion, or do they just sting in general? For me, having more acne prone skin, I find that certain sunscreens sting on my blemishes or like open fissures or cuts in my skin, whereas the same sunscreen won't sting if I apply it to unbroken skin. But then there are some other formulas that just sting no matter what. And remember that you can still have an irritation to a physical sunscreen, but you're less likely to. And that's why the physical/mineral ones tend to be recommended by people, including dermatologists, just because they have a less likely chance of causing irritation. Now, there's also Korean sunscreens, and in Korea or in other places like Germany, they have sunscreen filters that are not approved here in the USA. And because of that, they have some sunscreen filters that are actually more gentle on the skin. But again, this is why turning and learning those ingredients are so important. And if you see a common ingredient pop up when your skin starts to flush or sting, that's when you should be aware of it and start avoiding it. Some of the best sunscreens that don't sting that I've ever used have been the ROVECTIN one. We actually have a very sensitive editor named Doris, and she has rubbed this in her eyes and it didn't sting, and she's sensitive to everything. That is a really great one if you're looking for a K-beauty sunscreen that just works. And a lot of American sunscreens tend to sting. I've had really good luck with the Dr. Sam's Flawless sunscreen. That one is bomb diggity. It's like an SPF 50, and that one is more of a hybrid sunscreen, but that one doesn't irritate me. You just have to shop around and find something that's in your budget that works, that doesn't sting, because that is going to be different for everyone. And another thing that a lot of people realize is kind of creeping up in their ingredient lists is actually phenoxyethanol. Now, what is phenoxyethanol? Well, if we look, we see that at the end it says OL, and that tells us that it is technically a type of alcohol. But in skincare, it's not used as one, it's used as a preservative, and sometimes a fragrancing agent. But phenoxyethanol is essentially what is used to preserve products. Do you remember when the internet and basically the entire beauty industry went crazy over parabens, and they're like, parabens are bad, we must avoid them? Well, you know, people started throwing a fit without knowing all of the scientific data and not knowing that literal fruits like grapes have parabens in them. Anyways, consumers started demanding that their products be paraben free. So what did the industry do? Well, they wanted to sell us a bunch of products, so they said, okay, we're gonna make it paraben free, and they did. But remember that parabens preserve products. Why does a product need to be preserved? So that mold and bacteria and nasty things don't grow in the formula and basically infect us. Because of that, they needed to find something else to preserve the product, and what do you know, phenoxyethanol came along. Now, phenoxyethanol is fine. It's normally used in concentrations of under 2%, and it does help to preserve a product. But for some people, whenever they apply a product, they notice that their skin flushes, it stings, and it feels irritated for like 30 seconds, and then it goes away. Have you ever had that happen? One of my favorite products that Dr. Dre got me hooked on is the Teami Detox face mask, and oh my god, when I would put that on, my face would flush, and then after 30 seconds, it would go away. Most of the time, if the product has phenoxyethanol, that is the phenoxyethanol. And when you think about it, it's an aromatic alcohol, so when you put it on, you know, it flushes and then it dissipates, it evaporates off the skin, and that's why it usually stops burning after 30 seconds to a minute. Now, if you are super sensitive and if you have an irritation to phenoxyethanol, you're gonna find that in a lot of natural products, but unfortunately, that could be causing flushing and irritation to some sensitive skin types. It's not gonna be the same for everyone, and remember, every single product is going to have a different amount of phenoxyethanol in it, and they might even have other ingredients such as fragrances or essential oils or things that could be contributing to it. But if you do have sensitive skin, look for phenoxyethanol. And if you have a lot of products that kind of make your skin flush like that, see if phenoxyethanol is a common ingredient, and that might just be your culprit. And this probably goes without saying, but if you're allergic to something, fucking avoid it. There are some people who are allergic to carrageenan, seaweed. And what happens if they use seaweed? Well, number one, they could die of anaphylaxis. You don't want that. But it could really irritate their skin or give them itchiness or hives. If you're allergic to certain flowers and you use a product that had flowers in it, yeah, that could be extremely irritating. One of my good internet friends and actually bloggers is named Chelsea Pearl. She's on Instagram. She blogs about wine and fashion. She's amazing if you want to go follow her. But she has been extremely open about her allergy to seaweed and how difficult that is because she can't use a lot of products such as this one, which I do love but is not safe for sensitive skin. Instead of this one, OSEA has a fragrance-free hyaluronic acid C serum that I would recommend. Use that one, not this one. But if Chelsea were to use either, because they both have seaweed, her skin would break out in what's called urticaria, basically a rash, hives. And yes, if it's bad enough, it can cause anaphylaxis, where basically it's hard to breathe and you're having a full-fledged allergic reaction. If that happens, boom, stab your thigh with an EpiPen can call the hospital and get going ASAP. Stop watching this video if you're going into anaphylactic shock, just a little PSA. And unfortunately, there are skincare ingredients that can actually cause allergies or anaphylaxis in some people. One of the most nightmare skin stories of anaphylactic shock that I was told in aesthetics school was actually about what happened when an esthetician left a client in the room and she had an allergic reaction. I actually don't know if it was seaweed. I believe it was, and I believe it was actually here in the Bay Area. But essentially, this is why, as an esthetician or as any medical provider, you should never leave the treatment room when a client or patient is undergoing some sort of a treatment. Essentially, an esthetician had put on some sort of face mask to a woman who was laying there. The esthetician and the person who was getting the treatment did not know that the woman getting the treatment was allergic to something inside of that, and she ended up having an allergic reaction, her throat closed up, and she died. And that is why, as an esthetician, as a care provider, as a nurse, dermatologist, anyone, if you are doing a treatment or procedure on someone, you never leave the room until the treatment or the procedure is done. You do not leave them alone. And it's specifically because, yes, unfortunately, even skincare products can cause allergic reactions. Now that is obviously an extreme example of when sensitivity in skincare goes bad. Obviously, hopefully that's not happening to you at home. And if you do know that you have allergies, this is why you always want to patch test first, or even get an allergy test. I've been thinking of getting, what is it called? The Everwell allergy test. It's like $200, but I have been thinking of getting it because I have some weird allergies, and allergies can change over the course of your lifetime. I get to work with an amazing person on our team who's actually heavily allergic to onions, believe it or not. And like her throat starts to close up if like her food came in contact with onions. Crazy. And yes, there's actually onion and garlic skincare. There's some from some of my favorite K-beauty brands. They're really good, but she can't use them. And this just goes to show that if you have a fucking allergy, don't use skincare that has the allergens in it. And that's why an allergy test, preferably performed by an immunologist or by a doctor who can actually monitor you, can be really helpful. Let me know if you want a journey of me testing out my own allergies. But yeah, if you're fucking allergic, don't use skincare that has whatever that thing is as an ingredient. Always remember to be beautiful both inside and out. Reapply that sunscreen as long as it doesn't burn your beautiful sensitive skin. And I cannot wait to see you in this next video and the meme at the end. Love you guys. Bye.